Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in. My name is Megan Shave, and today I will be talking about the work from my time as a graduate student at Michigan State University. For my dissertation project, I explored the conservation and agricultural applications of nest boxes for American kestrels in Michigan cherry orchards. The guiding framework behind this project can be described as a coupled natural and human system. In this diagram here, I have outlined how this relationship works. On the left, we have a natural system, in this case, a set of predator-prey interactions, also known as a trophic chain or a food chain. In this chain, we have a predator that feeds on other animal prey, and that prey feeds on plants. So if you increase the number of predators in the system, you increase the predation pressure and decrease the number of prey, which in turn can indirectly benefit the plants at the bottom of the trophic chain. If you think of this system as occurring in an agricultural setting, the predator in this case could be preying on known crop pests. And by decreasing the number of crop pests, you can decrease damage and benefit the crop plants. This is known as a regulating ecosystem service that can benefit growers in the human food production system by improving their crop yields, and these benefits are passed on to consumers in the form of better food products or better food prices. These benefits may then motivate the growers and the consumers to help out those predators, for example, by providing them with habitat enhancements that make it easier for them to hunt or breed or otherwise persist in the agricultural landscape, and so the cycle continues. For this project, I was interested in one avian predator in particular, the American kestrel. This small falcon is known to eat a variety of prey and therefore potentially a variety of crop pests. So I decided to investigate the benefits of nest boxes as a habitat enhancement for kestrels in Michigan cherry orchards. Michigan is the top producer of tart cherries in the United States and one of the top producers of sweet cherries as well. Cherries are therefore an important crop in Michigan's regional economy. The American kestrel is also a species of research interest due to recent conservation concerns. Although kestrels are the most common and widespread falcon in North America, populations have been declining throughout their range since the 1960s. These declines are due potentially to multiple factors, including habitat loss. It is thought that the human management of landscapes has reduced the number of tree snags and other sources of nesting cavities for kestrels, hence the recent interest in kestrel nest boxes. For this project, we installed new kestrel boxes in Leelanau County, the major cherry-producing region of Michigan. The nest box and pivoting tower were designed by Tom Comfort. You can find the design plans on the website linked at the bottom of this slide. We attached the box to the tower using a turntable bearing, which allowed us to lower the towers for easy access while still holding the boxes straight with a rope attached to the bottom of the box. I will be presenting this project in two parts, Part 1, conservation, and Part 2, agriculture. For Part 1, the objective was to determine the effects of nest boxes on kestrel reproductive rates and kestrel presence in the cherry growing region. For Part 2, the objective was to quantify kestrel prey removal efforts and determine the effects of kestrel predation on prey abundances. The first topic of conservation interest was the reproductive rates of kestrels using nest boxes. We wanted to know whether kestrels were actually using the boxes we installed, and we wanted to know that the kestrels were able to successfully rear young in these boxes. We therefore monitored the kestrel boxes in a number of ways. We did regular nest checks using a pole-mounted camera with an attached screen for real-time viewing of the box contents. We also installed cameras on the outside of the boxes to periodically record prey deliveries to the boxes. We also lowered the boxes a few times per season to band the nestlings or to fit the adults with tracking devices. More on those devices later. What we found was that kestrels did use the boxes, up to 100% of them in fact, and 91% of all of the nesting attempts over the 3-year period were successful in producing fledglings. Most nests contain 5 eggs, and the mean number of fledglings was just about 4 per nest. These reproductive rates were all high relative to other nest box programs with reported rates. So we knew the kestrels were using the boxes, but we also wanted to know if the boxes were useful for increasing kestrel presence across this fruit-growing region. To investigate this, we conducted roadside surveys along 4 transects. Each transect was divided into 1-mile-long segments or sites. We conducted multiple surveys each breeding season for 4 years and recorded whether kestrels were spotted at each site along the transects. Over the course of those 4 years, we also continued to install nest boxes in orchards along the transects. As a result, some sites had boxes all 4 years, some had boxes for only 1 or 2 years, and some sites never had boxes. We used this arrangement to model the effect of the boxes on kestrel presence at a site. We found that kestrels were significantly more likely to be present at a site with a kestrel box, and as a result, kestrel presence increased over the 4 years along with the increase in the number of sites with boxes. These results provide evidence that the breeding kestrel population in this region is limited by the number of nest sites, though we cannot be sure from this study that the boxes actually increased the kestrel population as a whole. We can conclude from this data that kestrels were more likely to choose breeding territories that had nest boxes. This is important information for the growers and landowners because these results show that installing a nest box in an orchard resulted in a high probability that a kestrel would occupy that orchard for the breeding season. And that leads us into part 2, the agricultural applications of the nest boxes. We first wanted to quantify what prey the kestrels were catching and delivering to their nests, and in doing so, what prey they were removing from this agricultural system. We collected this prey delivery data using the cameras mounted to the outside of the boxes. This clip shows a male kestrel delivering a meadow vole to the nest. And if you didn't catch it the first time, here it is again. Based on a review of 179 days of recording across 15 boxes, we documented over 7,000 prey deliveries. Over 81% of these deliveries were of arthropods, particularly insects. Small mammals were the second most common prey type at about 14% of deliveries, followed by birds at about 2%. The kestrels would also occasionally deliver annelid worms, frogs or snakes, and snails or slugs. From the video recordings and nest box remains collections, we were able to determine that kestrels did consume orchard pests, including grasshoppers, meadow voles, and fruit-eating birds such as American robins and European starlings. We ran some models on the delivery data to identify some statistically significant factors affecting the delivery rates. For example, the total number of prey deliveries were higher when temperatures were higher and precipitation was low. Conversely, total prey numbers were lower, but the number of mammal prey were higher when the weather was colder and wetter. Number of prey deliveries were higher when the nestling period overlapped with the emergence of grasshoppers and other winged insects, which is probably a response of kestrels opportunistically catching this abundant food supply. We also found that larger brood sizes coincided with more total and more mammal deliveries. And interestingly, nests with more female nestlings received more mammal deliveries than nests that had more males. We were also interested in where the kestrels might be getting the prey that we saw delivered to the boxes. To investigate this, we temporarily attached GPS data loggers to the adult kestrels using backpack harnesses. We used these data loggers to record the locations of the kestrels prior to their deliveries of prey to the boxes. This gave us an approximation of where the prey were coming from. In these maps, the yellow triangles show the locations of the kestrels prior to making deliveries of invertebrate prey to the boxes, while the blue squares show the locations of the kestrels prior to making deliveries of vertebrate prey to the boxes. In these maps, the red hatched areas represent orchards, and the gray-green solid areas represent wooded areas. The red stars are the locations of the nest boxes. We analyzed this location data further by modeling the relationship between delivery type, vertebrate versus invertebrate, and distance from the nest box. Our results showed that a kestrel was more likely to deliver vertebrate prey the further it was from the box before making that delivery. This makes sense in relation to central place foraging, a theory that states that it is more energetically favorable for a predator to carry a large prey item back to the nest than to carry a smaller item the same distance. In other words, it's fine for a kestrel to catch a series of grasshoppers right outside its nest box and make those quick trips back and forth. But it would be a waste of a flight for a kestrel to carry one grasshopper all the way back from a field that's a half-mile away. That same flight would be worth it, though, for something more substantial like a vole or a bird. From this data, then, we can draw several conclusions that help us assess the prey removal capabilities of kestrels using orchard nest boxes. We saw that kestrels consume a variety of prey, including known orchard pests. We saw that kestrel prey deliveries vary with features of the weather, of seasonal timing of the nests, and brood features of the nests. We also saw that kestrels are more likely to deliver small prey captured near the box and larger prey captured further away from the box. These conclusions allow us to make some predictions for potential cases of pest control by kestrels. For example, it's been documented that dry summers lead to spikes in grasshopper numbers, which means increased leaf damage that can cause big problems for young cherry trees in particular. But we also know that kestrels catch grasshoppers, and we know that kestrels deliver more prey, and therefore more grasshoppers, when it's hot and dry. We also know that kestrels are more likely to deliver small prey when they're hunting right outside their nests. Put that all together, and we could predict that a kestrel box would benefit a young orchard that is vulnerable to grasshoppers during dry summers. Growers should therefore consider the particular threats to their orchards when planning to place kestrel boxes. To dive deeper into the effects of kestrel predation, we decided to focus on two important prey types known to cause damage in orchards: rodents and fruit-eating birds. So first, we examine the effects of installing nest boxes on small mammal abundances in orchards. Returning to this graph, we saw that small mammals were the second most common prey type delivered to the nest boxes, with over 1,000 mammals documented in the recordings. Review of the mammal deliveries showed that the most common prey was the meadow vole, Microtus pennsylvanicus, followed by the deer mouse, Peromyscus. Our hypothesis was that kestrel predation potentially dampens peak rodent abundances to reduce orchard damage risk. We predicted that summer rodent abundances would be lower at orchards with active kestrel boxes. Although kestrels are not present in Michigan during the winter, we predicted that small mammal presence would be lower in orchards with boxes if the predation from the past summer combined with rodenticide application, reduced the small mammal populations below the threshold for presence in the orchard during the winter. We conducted surveys in the summer using Sherman live traps, set up in grids with traps placed between trees in the orchard rows. We conducted surveys in the winter using camera trapping stations that did not need to be checked as regularly and were therefore more convenient for winter use. We captured a variety of small mammal species during the summer surveys, the most common being the peromyscus or deer mice. Interestingly, we only captured 2 meadow voles in all the orchards, despite their abundance in the kestrels' diets, which suggests that the kestrels may not be capturing voles from the orchards themselves. Notably, we also captured a least weasel, Mustela nivalis, at one of the orchards with a kestrel box. Weasels hunt smaller rodents as well, so we excluded the data from this orchard from our analysis due to the presence of this known competing predator. We found that orchards with kestrel boxes had lower small mammal abundances than orchards without. We also found lower mammal abundances in orchards that had recently been mowed. The lowest recorded abundances were therefore associated with orchards that both had a kestrel box and had recently been mowed. Our small mammal detections were low overall during the winter surveys. We detected activity at only 17 of the 51 trap locations and during only 19 of 135 survey events. Our analyses showed no differences between orchards except edge effects. That is, camera traps placed at the edges of orchards had more detections than traps placed in the interior of orchards. All of the detections made during the winter were identified as the peromyscus or deer mice. Based on the summer and winter surveys, we came to the following conclusions. Summer small mammal abundances were lower in orchards with kestrel boxes. However, the winter surveys did not detect any carryover effects of the summer predation after the kestrels had migrated. Voles were not detected in the orchards despite their presence in the kestrel diet and their status as an important winter orchard pest. We suspect this may be due to lack of adequate vegetative cover during the summer due to the grass mowing, and a lack of adequate snow cover during the winter of 2015 when we conducted the winter surveys. Finally, the year-round presence of the peromyscus mice suggests a potentially greater role for those species in orchard damage. While voles are well-documented winter orchard pests, peromyscus mice may be important as well. For example, during the summer, I even observed peromyscus mice climbing mature cherry trees, which could make them a threat to fruit as well as to the trees themselves, which is where rodent damage is most often documented. Following our results then, we also came up with a few recommendations for future work with small mammals. We recommend that future studies repeat surveys over multiple seasons and multiple years in order to better detect any carryover effects of migratory predators. We recommend that surveys include orchards with and without winter rodenticide use, or with study-controlled use of rodenticides to better isolate the effects of the predation itself. Finally, we recommend that future studies identify which small mammals are important orchard pests under different conditions. For example, voles may be the main cause of tree damage only when snow provides adequate cover for them in the orchards. Peromyscus mice are known to be less reliant on cover, so they may be a threat to trees under a variety of weather conditions. And finally, to wrap up the agriculture portion of the project, we also examined the effects of nest boxes and perches on fruit-eating bird abundances in orchards. You may be thinking, though, how can kestrels affect birds in orchards when birds make up only 2% of the kestrel diet? The answer there is in the details of how kestrel predation can affect prey. Our hypothesis was that kestrels can reduce fruit-eating bird abundances through 2 related mechanisms. First, the consumption of bird prey, known as the direct effect of predation. Second, kestrels can also reduce bird abundances by acting as a cue of predation, which is an indirect effect of predation. Indirect effects of predation affect prey animals even when the individuals are not killed and consumed. We predicted that kestrel boxes and perches provide a cue of predation risk to fruit-eating birds, and that predation risk will induce anti-predator behaviors in the birds. More specifically, the presence of kestrels using nest boxes and perches in an orchard will direct fruit-eating birds to forage elsewhere in order to avoid the risk of being hunted by a kestrel in that particular orchard. To investigate this, we conducted bird surveys in orchards with and without kestrel boxes and perches. All survey areas were the same length and width in order to standardize the area where the birds were counted. The map here shows 2 survey areas in an orchard with a kestrel box and perches. The top area is in a tart cherry block, and the bottom area is in a sweet cherry block within the same orchard system. During these surveys, we identified multiple species that are documented to eat cherries. The most frequently encountered fruit-eating bird was the American robin. Interestingly, we did not observe many European starlings during these surveys, despite their reputation for damage to cherry orchards. This could be explained because starlings are often observed moving between orchards in flocks and may not be spending enough time in any individual orchard to be picked up in a survey. We counted fewer birds at orchards with kestrel boxes compared to orchards without boxes. We also counted fewer birds in tart cherry blocks versus sweet cherry blocks, which was expected given the higher sugar content in sweet cherries. The lowest mean bird counts were therefore in tart cherry blocks with kestrel boxes, while the highest mean bird counts were in sweet cherry blocks without kestrel boxes. Now, we did not find a significant effect of perches on fruit-eating bird counts, which suggests that perches are not as reliable a cue of predation risk than the kestrel nests themselves. However, kestrels did use the perches, with perches in young orchard blocks getting more use than perches in mature blocks. The young blocks likely provide better visibility between trees compared to older blocks, and the perches provide a vantage point that's otherwise not available by perching in those shorter trees in the young orchards. We also found that perch use was the highest around a week after the nests had fledged. And the video recordings of the perches sometimes showed multiple fledglings using a perch at the same time. This suggests that nearby perches may be particularly useful for kestrels that are fledging from these orchard nest boxes. Using our fruit-eating bird abundance data and additional data on box installation costs and on fruit consumption rates by birds, we collaborated with economists at USDA-APHIS Wildlife Services to calculate benefit-cost ratios for installing kestrel boxes. We calculated that it would cost between $8,000 and $32,000 to install and maintain kestrel boxes across the sweet cherry hectarage in Michigan, with appropriate spacing between boxes to allow for kestrel territoriality. We also calculated that between $2.6 and $2.9 million worth of additional sweet cherries could be produced if kestrels occupied the boxes and reduced fruit-eating bird abundances at the rates observed in our study. This results in a benefit-cost ratio of between 84 and 357, meaning that for every dollar spent on kestrel nest boxes, between $84 and $357 worth of additional sweet cherry production could be gained. The economists then plugged these production gains into a regional economic model of the entire cherry growing industry and related industries in Michigan. And using that model, they calculated that between 46 and 50 new jobs could be created in Michigan over a 5-year period as a result of decreased bird damage and increased cherry production in the orchards. These results therefore paint a promising picture for the benefits of kestrel box installation throughout the fruit-growing regions of Michigan. To wrap up then, here are some take-home messages summarizing the findings from this project. First, we found that kestrels readily used the orchard nest boxes and showed high reproductive rates. We found that the installation of nest boxes increased kestrel presence in this fruit-growing region of Michigan. We documented that kestrels consume a wide variety of prey, including known orchard pests. We found that kestrel prey deliveries vary with weather, brood features, and the proximity to the hunting areas. Fruit-eating bird and small mammal abundances were reduced in orchards with active nest boxes. And finally, kestrel nest boxes are a highly cost-effective way for enhancing ecosystem services in cherry orchards provided by this native predator, the American kestrel. I'd like to take a moment now just to acknowledge the various groups and agencies that provided funding for equipment and travel throughout the course of this project. I was also fortunate to work with a number of cherry growers, as well as a number of field assistants who were vital in installing and maintaining the nest boxes, as well as providing assistance in the monitoring activities. And with that, I thank you all for taking the time to learn about the benefits of nest boxes for falcons and farmers in Michigan's cherry orchards. If you are interested in reading more about the studies referenced in this presentation, the citations are provided on the last slide. Thank you.